The parking garage smelled like motor oil and old rain, and Marcus Cole was already late. He knew it the moment he turned off the engine and looked at the clock on the dashboard. 6:53. The after-school program closed at 7, and Zara had already been the last kid picked up twice this month. Her teacher, Miss Pauline, never said anything sharp about it, but Marcus could feel the weight of her patience thinning every time he rushed through that door with grease still on his hands, and apologies already climbing out of his mouth. He grabbed his keys, locked the truck, and started walking fast toward the stairwell that would take him to the street level. The garage was mostly empty at this hour. Just a few cars, the hum of a dying fluorescent light somewhere above him, and the echo of his own footsteps on concrete. He was halfway to the stairs when he heard the voices. Not loud, that was the thing. It was not yelling or anything dramatic enough to call attention to itself. It was the kind of conversation that is kept deliberately quiet because the people having it do not want anyone nearby to hear. Low, controlled, insistent. Two men talking over a woman who was clearly trying to hold her ground. Marcus slowed. He was not the kind of man who inserted himself into situations that did not concern him. He had a daughter to pick up, a shop to open by 7 the next morning, and a lease he was 3 months from losing. He had enough problems of his own. But he looked anyway. She was standing near the east stairwell, a woman in a gray coat, her posture straight, her hands at her sides. Still. The kind of still that people get when they are using every piece of control they have left just to stay standing in one spot. Two men flanked her. Suits. The expensive kind that signals money, and also a particular kind of threat, because men who dress that well in parking garages are not there by accident. One of them held a phone close to her face, the screen lit. The other held a large envelope, thick with paper, and kept tapping it against his own palm, slow and deliberate, like a countdown. Marcus stopped walking entirely. He watched for 3 seconds. 4. 5. The man with the envelope leaned closer to the woman and said something in a voice too low to reach Marcus. Whatever it was, her jaw tightened. Just slightly. Most people would not have noticed. Marcus noticed because he had spent 3 years learning to read every small signal in a small face, and reading people had become the same instinct. He walked over. He did not run, did not raise his voice, did not do anything that would make the situation louder or more complicated than it needed to be. He simply closed the distance between himself and the woman in the gray coat, and when he was close enough, he said, in the calm, flat, certain voice he used at 2 in the morning when bad dreams had teeth, "There you are." The two men turned. The woman turned too, and for 1 full second, Marcus looked at a stranger looking back at him with a face that was processing things very fast and very carefully. "Been looking for you," he said. He said it to her, only to her. One of the men, the one with the envelope, studied him. "You know her?" Marcus did not look at the man. He kept his eyes on the woman, steady, patient, giving her the space to understand what he was offering, and to take it or leave it. She took it. "Yes," she said. Her voice was clear. No trembling. Whatever she was feeling, she had locked it behind something very solid. "This is my husband." The two men exchanged a look. Whatever leverage they had brought with them into this garage depended on her being alone. Marcus could see them recalculating, the slight shift in their posture, the reassessment running behind their eyes. "We'll be in touch," the man with the phone said. He lowered it, pocketed it. The other man tucked the envelope under his arm. They walked away. Marcus and the woman stood in the space the men had left behind. The fluorescent light above them buzzed and flickered. Somewhere below, a car started. She looked at him. She was not what he had expected, though he had not really had time to form an expectation. Her face was composed, the kind of composed that is not natural but trained, built over years of needing to look unbothered in rooms full of people who are watching for cracks. Her eyes were dark and direct. She was looking at him the way people look at a map they are trying to read in the dark. "You didn't have to do that," she said. "I know," he said. A small sound from behind him. He turned. Zara was standing 3 feet away, wearing her school backpack shaped like a green frog, holding a drawing that had been crumpled somewhere in the last hour, and then carefully reflattened. She had apparently walked in from the street entrance and found him here, instead of at the program door. She was 6. and she had her father's eyes, which meant she was looking at the woman in the gray coat with the same quiet, careful attention. "Daddy," Zara said, "who is that lady?" He looked at his daughter, then back at the woman, who was watching Zara with an expression that had softened around the edges without her seeming to realize it. "Nobody, baby," he said. He took Zara's hand. The woman in the gray coat watched them walk toward the stairs. She did not call after him. She did not ask for his name. She just stood there in that buzzing, flickering light, holding herself very still, and said nothing at all. His name was Marcus Cole. 34 years old, he ran a small auto repair shop called Cole's Garage on the east side of the city, in a neighborhood that had seen better decades. The sign above the door was hand-painted, dark green letters on a white board, the kind of sign that tells you the person who put it up was more focused on the work inside than the impression outside. He had owned the shop for 6 years. Before that, he had worked for someone else's garage, saving everything, until he had just enough to take over a lease on a space that was barely holding together, but had good bones and a solid lift in the back bay. He raised Zara alone, had been doing so since she was 3. There was no dramatic story attached to how that happened, or rather, there was, but Marcus kept it in a place he did not visit often and never invited anyone else into. Zara's mother had left on a January morning, and that was the whole of what he told anyone who asked. And most people learned quickly that asking twice was not something he welcomed. Zara was, by any honest measure, the most important thing in his world. She came to the shop after school every day and did her homework on a folding table between the parts catalog and the small electric heater he kept running in the corner of the office. She had opinions about engine sounds. She had a favorite wrench that she called George and was not allowed to actually touch anything with. She was 6, and she was ferocious, and she was the reason Marcus Cole got up every single morning without fail. The day after the parking garage, he dropped her at school, opened the shop at 7, and had 3 cars already waiting. A brake job on a sedan, an oil change on a pickup, and a transmission problem on an old station wagon that was going to take most of the morning. He put on his overalls, tied back his work gloves, and got under the station wagon by 8. By 10, he had mostly forgotten about the woman in the gray coat. By 10:15, she walked through his garage door. He heard the footsteps first, not heavy, not hesitant, even. The walk of someone who knows exactly where they are going and has already decided what they are going to say when they get there. He stayed under the station wagon. "Mr. Cole?" He slid out from under the car on his board, sat up, looked at her. She was wearing different clothes, still a coat, different color, navy this time, and still that posture, that perfect controlled stillness. She had a small bag over one shoulder, and she held an envelope in her hand. Not the same envelope. A smaller one. White. He stood up, wiped his hands on a rag and waited. "My name is Elena Voss," she said. "I believe I owe you something." She held out the envelope. He did not take it. She held it a little closer. He still did not take it. "It's $40,000, she said, and she said it the way people say things they assume will end the conversation. He looked at the envelope, then at her. "No," he said. She blinked. Just once. Fast. The blink of someone who has not heard that word directed at them in a very long time. At least, not about money. "I beg your pardon?" "I didn't do it for money," he said. "Then what did you do it for?" He picked up a wrench, not because he needed it, just because his hands were more comfortable with something in them when he was having a conversation he had not planned for. He turned back toward the station wagon. "Nothing from you," he said. There was a silence behind him, the kind of silence that has texture, that you can feel on the back of your neck. He kept working. Then a small voice from the back office doorway said, "Are you the parking garage lady?" He closed his eyes for 1 second. Zara had a half day at school on Wednesdays. Elena Voss turned. Zara was standing in the doorway with a juice box, and the expression of someone who has just confirmed a theory they have been developing since last night. "I am," Elena said. "Daddy said you were nobody." Elena was quiet for a moment. She looked from the child to the man, who had not turned around, and then back to the child. "Your daddy," she said, carefully. is not entirely right about that. Zara considered this with great seriousness. He's usually right about most things, she said, but not always. She disappeared back into the office. Elena Voss stood in Cole's garage with $40,000 in a white envelope and no good next move, which was, she would think later, the first genuinely new feeling she had experienced in years. She put the envelope on his workbench. She left. He did not touch it. It was still there the next morning when he opened up. He put it in the drawer under the register and told himself he would figure out how to return it later. He did not return it. He told himself it was because he did not have her contact information. This was not entirely untrue, and not entirely the point. 3 days passed. Then she came back. This time she did not bring an envelope. She brought a book. It was a children's book about how engines work, illustrated in bright colors, accurate in its descriptions of combustion and fuel systems in a way that most children's books about machinery are too lazy to bother with. She put it on the workbench without explanation. She sat down, uninvited, on the old wooden stool in the corner that Marcus kept meaning to replace. Zara found the book within 2 minutes. Zara did not look up from it for 20. Marcus watched this happen and said nothing for a long time. Then he said, "What do you actually want?" Elena Voss looked at him. "I want to make you a proposal," she said. "A real one. Not money for a favor. A contract." He crossed his arms. "Not hostile. Just careful. I'm listening." She laid it out clearly. The men in the garage had not been strangers. They worked for a group of people who wanted something from her company, something she was not prepared to give, and they had come with evidence, manufactured evidence, that they believed gave them leverage. She had 30 days before they were legally required to file the documents they were holding. In 30 days, her team could find out who inside her circle had helped build that case against her. But they would be watching her, and a woman with a husband and a family was harder to isolate and harder to pressure than a woman alone. She did not need anything complicated. She needed him to appear at 3 public events over the next 30 days, a charity dinner, a board luncheon, 1 press appearance at an opening she could not avoid. She needed him to stand beside her and say very little, which, she noted, seemed to come naturally to him. She named a number. It was not $40,000. It was larger. He said nothing for a long time. Then he said, "Zara comes with me." Elena blinked. "She's a child." "Yes," he said. "And wherever you take me, she's there, or I'm not. I don't have anyone to leave her with on short notice. She's part of the deal or there's no deal." Elena looked toward the back office where Zara was now apparently reading the engine book aloud to herself, and occasionally correcting its phrasing. "Fine," Elena said. "And you don't lie to her," Marcus said. "About what?" "About anything. She asks you something, you answer honestly. She's smart enough to know the difference and I won't have her confused about what's real." Elena looked at him for a long moment. "She's 6. What would she ask me?" Marcus went back to work. "She'll ask you if you're sad," he said. "She always does, and she'll know if you're lying." Elena Voss left the garage for the 2nd time that week, with nothing resolved and something she could not name sitting at the bottom of her chest. She sat in her car. She sat there for 4 minutes before she started it. She could not remember the last time anyone had warned her that she would be caught lying. She had people in her life, staff, advisors, board members, a cousin she trusted above everyone, who had never once asked her if she was sad. She started the car. She called her assistant and told her to draw up a contract. She drove back to her building, which was 42 floors of glass and purpose, and she went upstairs and stood at her window and looked at the city and thought about a man who had stepped into a dangerous situation for a stranger without asking for anything, and whose 6-year-old daughter read engine manuals for fun. She thought about what kind of life produces a person like that. She had spent her entire adult life surrounded by people who wanted things from her. It was so constant and so complete that she had stopped noticing it, the way you stop hearing traffic after you have lived on a busy street long enough. Marcus Cole wanted nothing from her. She did not know what to do with that. The contract was drawn up by morning. She sent it over. He read it, corrected 2 clauses in handwriting that was precise and clear, and signed it. The 30 days began. The charity dinner was first, 9 days after they signed the contract. It was held in a hotel ballroom downtown, the kind of event where the food was excellent and the conversation was performed rather than had, where people shook hands across tables and said things they had rehearsed while looking like they had just thought of them. Marcus arrived in a suit he owned from a cousin's wedding 4 years ago. It still fit. He looked at himself in the mirror that morning, and Zara stood behind him and told him he looked very smart, which was the highest compliment in her vocabulary. She was wearing a blue dress with white buttons and her hair in 2 braids, and she carried a small bag that contained a book, a juice box, and a folded drawing she planned to give to the parking garage lady, though no one had asked her to do this. Elena met them in the lobby of the hotel. She wore something dark and structured, and her hair was up, and she looked exactly like what she was, which was a woman who controlled a room before she entered it. She looked at Marcus. Then she looked at Zara. Zara looked back at her without blinking. "You look nice," Zara said. "Thank you," Elena said. "Are you sad tonight?" Marcus made no movement and no sound. He had warned her. He had told her exactly what was coming, and he had told her because he meant it, not as a test, but as simple information, the way you tell someone a road is slippery before they drive on it. Elena looked at the child. "A little," she said. Zara nodded as though this was the correct and expected answer. She reached into her bag and took out the folded drawing. She held it out to Elena. "I made this for you," she said. "It's a car engine. Daddy helped me with the parts that were hard." Elena took the drawing. She unfolded it carefully. It was a crayon illustration of an engine, labeled in a 6-year-old's handwriting, surprisingly accurate in its layout, with an arrow pointing to the carburetor and the word carb written beside it in purple crayon. Elena looked at it for longer than the moment required. "This is very good," she said. "I know," Zara said, and walked ahead of them into the ballroom. Marcus looked at Elena. She was still holding the drawing with both hands. "Come on," he said, and they followed his daughter inside. The dinner was long and full of the kind of people who existed in a world Marcus had never been part of. People with the particular ease of those who have never had to worry about a lease date or a school pickup time. They looked at him with the friendly, careful curiosity of people trying to figure out where to place him. He did not help them figure it out. He sat beside Elena, ate well, spoke when spoken to, and said things that were quiet and accurate, and occasionally caused the person he was talking to pause and reconsider whatever they had just said. Zara sat between them, worked through her juice box, and at one point informed a man across the table, unprompted, that the sound his watch made was a sign the battery was running low. The man checked his watch. She was right. Elena leaned close to Marcus during the dessert course and said, very quietly, "Your daughter just told Gerald Morton, who runs a hedge fund with $8 billion in assets, that his watch battery is dying." "Is she right?" Marcus said. "Yes." "Then she's fine," he said. Elena sat back. She looked at the room. She looked at Zara, who was now drawing something on a napkin with a pen she had produced from her bag. She felt something unfamiliar shift in her chest, small and warm, and without a category. She did not examine it too closely. She had learned, a long time ago, that the things that feel warm in the chest are the things that cost the most when they go. The board luncheon came 6 days later. Marcus wore the same suit. Zara wore a different dress, red this time, and brought 2 books. She sat at a small table near the back of the room with Elena's assistant, a young man named Patrick who spent 20 minutes talking to Zara about engines and left the conversation visibly humbled. Marcus sat at the main table. He said almost nothing for the first 40 minutes. He listened. He watched the people around him, the way they talked to Elena, the way certain of them smiled in a way that did not quite reach their eyes, the way one man in particular, broad-shouldered, with a silver tie and a very easy laugh, kept his eyes on Elena just a fraction too long, in a way that was not about admiration but about calculation. Marcus watched this man. His name, he learned from the seating card, was Daniel Voss, Elena's cousin. Marcus said nothing about this to Elena. He kept watching. After the luncheon, on the car ride back, Zara fell asleep against the window, and Elena sat in the front seat beside Marcus, in a silence that had shifted from formal to simply quiet. He drove. She looked at the city passing outside her window. "How did you know?" she said eventually. "Know what?" "In the garage. How did you know to step in? You didn't know who I was. You didn't know what was happening." He was quiet for a moment. "I knew what it looked like," he said. "That was enough." She looked at him. "Most people would have kept walking. Most people," he said, "have convinced themselves it's not their business." She looked back at the window. "And you haven't?" "Not about that kind of thing," he said. Outside, the city moved past. A light turned green. Zara made a small sound in her sleep and shifted, and both of them went quiet in the way that happens around a sleeping child, something careful and shared. It was the first time Marcus had felt anything like companionable since January, 3 years ago. He did not examine it. He drove. The third event was a press appearance at the opening of a new wing at the city's arts center. It was shorter than the others and more public, cameras and a small crowd, people with programs and lanyards, and Elena stood at the entrance and smiled the practiced smile, and shook the required hands, and Marcus stood beside her, with his hand at the small of her back, not holding, just present, because that was what the situation needed, and he had understood that, from the moment they arrived. What he had not expected was that her hand would find his, briefly, once, when a reporter pushed close with a camera and a question that was not quite polite, and that she would hold it for 3 seconds and then let go, and that those 3 seconds would sit in the back of his mind for the rest of the evening, like something he had misplaced and could not stop noticing was missing. That night, Zara told him Elena smelled like the kind of flowers that are in expensive places. "Hotels," he said. "Or hospitals," Zara said. "Those are different flowers." "I know," she said. "Elena smells like hotels." He tucked her in and turned off the light and stood in the hallway for a moment in the dark and quiet of his apartment, which was small and warm and full of Zara's drawings on the refrigerator and engine manuals on the coffee table. He was 14 days into 30. Something had already shifted and he was not certain what to do about it, so he did what he always did when he was not certain. He went to bed. He got up the next morning. He opened the shop at 7. He kept going. Inside Elena's company, things were moving fast and not well. Her security team had narrowed the leak. The manufactured evidence, the photographs and falsified documents meant to make it appear that Elena had used company funds for personal debts, had been built over 8 months. It required someone with access, deep access, the kind that only existed at a very small level of the organization. 3 people had that level of access. 2 of them had been with the company for over a decade. The third was Daniel Voss, her cousin. Elena received the final report on a Thursday evening in her office on the 38th floor. Her security director, a woman named Carol Hines who had worked in corporate intelligence for 20 years and had a voice like a calm river, placed the report on her desk and said, "I'm sorry, Elena. I wanted to be wrong about this." Elena read it. All of it. She sat very still. Daniel Voss had been with her through her father's illness. He had been in the hospital on the last night, sitting in the waiting room with her at 2 in the morning, when the hallways were empty, and the light was the particular flat color of places where people are afraid. He had held her hand. He had told her she was not alone. He had been planning this for longer than that night. She read the dates in the report and understood that while he was holding her hand in that waiting room, this had already been in motion, that what she had mistaken for love was something else, something she did not have a word clean enough for. Carol Hines left quietly. The door closed. Elena sat in her office for a long time. At some point, the overhead lights clicked off automatically. She did not turn them on. She sat in the dark in the glow of the city outside her window, and at some point, she stopped sitting in her chair and found herself on the floor with her back against the desk, which was not something she had planned or even noticed happening. She had her phone in her hand. She did not call anyone. There was no one to call. Her assistant would not know what to do. The board members she trusted professionally were not people she trusted with the particular texture of this. Her friends, such as they were, existed in the same world as Daniel, the same circles, the same events, and she no longer knew how to calibrate trust in that world. She sat on the floor. And then footsteps in the hallway. A knock. And the door opened. Marcus Cole stood in the doorway with a small yellow jacket over his arm. He looked at her. She was on the floor in the dark in a navy suit, and her hair was half pulled from its arrangement, and she was looking up at him, with an expression that was not one she ever let anyone see, because it was the expression underneath all the other ones, the one that had no training behind it. He looked at her for a long moment. Then he came in. He did not turn the lights on. He crossed the room and sat down on the floor across from her, back against the far wall, long legs stretched in front of him. He put the yellow jacket beside him. "Zara left this here last week," he said. "She wants it back before Monday." Elena looked at the jacket. "I know," she said. Her voice was rougher than usual. "I was going to have it cleaned and sent over." "It doesn't need cleaning," he said. "She'll just get it dirty again." She almost smiled. Not quite. They sat in the dark. Outside, the city did what it always did. Moved and glowed and paid no attention to any individual person inside any individual office on any particular floor. After a long time, Elena said, "My cousin built the case against me." Marcus said nothing. "He was in the hospital with me the night my father died," she said. "He held my hand." Still nothing. He was very good at staying present without filling the space. It was the rarest thing she had encountered in a room. A person who did not need to fix the silence. "I think," she said slowly, "I spent so long building things, the company, the reputation, all of it, that I stopped noticing that most of the people around me were there for what the building could do for them, not for me." He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Yeah, I know that one." 2 words after. No more. But in those 2 words was January, and a morning, and a pair of shoes left behind, and every single day since then that he had gotten up and made breakfast, and opened the shop and carried everything alone, because carrying it alone was safer than trusting the wrong person again. She heard all of it. She did not say so. They sat on the floor of her office for the next 40 minutes. The city glowed. The yellow jacket sat between them. Neither of them picked it up. When he stood to leave, he looked down at her. "You should go home," he said. "I have work. It'll still be here in the morning." She looked up at him. In the low glow of the city through the window, he looked like the kind of solid that takes a long time to build and does not come apart quickly. "Marcus," she said. He waited. "Thank you," she said. "For tonight. For just sitting there." He picked up the yellow jacket. "I'll tell Zara you're keeping the jacket clean," he said. He left. She sat on the floor for another 10 minutes. Then she got up, turned on the lights, and went back to work. The 30 days ended on a Friday. Marcus woke at 5:30, the same as always. Made coffee, woke Zara for school, made her toast, listened to her explain at length why George the wrench was the best wrench in the shop, and should be retired honorably rather than used further. He dropped her at school, opened the shop, worked through the morning. At noon he took a break, cleaned up, and drove downtown. He had the key card to Elena's building in his jacket pocket. He had used it 4 times over the past month, for the events and for that evening in her office, and now the contract was complete, and the card needed to go back. He parked, went in. The lobby of Elena's building was all glass and gray stone, and the particular temperature of places that cost too much to be uncomfortable. The woman at the front desk knew his face by now and waved him through. He took the elevator up. Elena was in a meeting when he arrived. Her assistant, Patrick, told him with a slightly uncertain look and asked if he wanted to wait. He waited. He sat in the chair outside her office and looked at the city through the window at the end of the hall and thought about nothing in particular. This was a skill he had developed as a mechanic, the ability to rest the mind fully while the hands were still, because eventually the hands would need everything the mind had, and burning through it on worry was waste. 15 minutes. 20. The meeting room door opened. People came out in 2s and 3s, talking, carrying folders. Elena came last. She was in a dark green jacket today, and she saw him the moment she stepped into the hallway, and something moved across her face very quickly, something that she gathered back in before it went far. She walked over. He stood, reached into his pocket, held out the keycard. She looked at it. She did not take it. He held it a little closer. She still did not take it. She looked at him instead, directly, in the way she had on the floor of her office, the underneath expression, the one with no training behind it. "I have a proposal," she said. He waited. "Not an arrangement," she said. "Not a contract. Not a number." The hallway was not empty. People moved through it. Patrick at his desk, 2 staff members crossing at the far end. None of them were paying close attention, but they were there. Elena Voss was not looking at any of them. She was looking at Marcus Cole. "I know what this sounds like," she said. "I know it's the day after the 30 days. I know how it appears. But I have spent my whole life doing things because they made sense to the people watching, and I don't want to do that anymore." He was quiet. "I know you don't want anything from me," she said. Her voice was steady. It cost her something to keep it steady. He could see that, but she kept it. "That is the reason I'm asking. Because you never wanted anything from me, which means when you show up, it's because you chose to." He stood there with the keycard in his hand and looked at the woman who had stood in a parking garage with her spine straight and her hands still, who had told his daughter she was a little sad and meant it, who had sat on the floor in the dark and not pretended to be fine. "Zara," he said, "is going to need at least 6 months of evidence that you're serious before she lets you near anything permanent." Elena breathed out slowly through her nose. "I know," she said. She looked at him. She reached into her jacket and held up Zara's small yellow jacket. Clean, pressed, neatly folded. He stared at it. "I told you I was going to have it cleaned," she said. He took the jacket. It was soft and warm in his hands, and it smelled like something good. He did not give back the key card. He put it back in his jacket pocket. He looked at her for one long moment, long enough that Patrick at the desk looked up once, and then very deliberately looked back down at his computer. Then Marcus Cole walked to the elevator. He pressed the button. The doors opened. He stepped in. Just before the doors closed, he looked back at her. "Zara has her school concert on Tuesday," he said. The doors closed. Elena Voss stood in the hallway of the 38th floor of her own building, with her hands at her sides, and something moving through her chest that she did not try to name, did not try to manage, and did not try to put in a category. She pulled out her phone. She opened her calendar. She blocked off Tuesday. She put the phone away and stood there for another moment, and then she walked back to her office, because there was still work to do, and she had always known how to do the work. But when she sat at her desk and pulled up her emails, the first thing she did, before anything else, was take out Zara's crayon drawing of an engine from the inside drawer where she had placed it on the night of the charity dinner. She unfolded it. She smoothed it out. She put it on her desk where she could see it. Then she got to work.